I think there are, like, I generally try to view civil servants, whether they're legislators or members of the Fish and Wildlife Department at all levels, like they're trying to do good work. I don't think anyone goes in there with ill intent, and yet if the only voice they hear is the anti-hunter, like these legislators are like, oh wow, there's obviously a problem here, and like we need to do something about this. Look at you taking charge.
Only one cup of coffee, too.
Welcome back to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails Podcast. Today, I am joined by Mike Colson, Adrian Geyer, and Matt Breton. Today, we're going to sit down. We're going to talk about S.258. Why don't each one of you guys just give a little background of who you are, what you stand for, what you do? Matt, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, I'm Matt Breton. In this role, I'm the president of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Conservation Group, a little group here in Morgan, Vermont. I'm also the co-chair of the Vermont State Team of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. BHA is how we abbreviate that. And I'm also on the New England chapter board of BHA. I've been involved in hunting and fishing stuff for a while, write a column for the Maine Sportsman. Wrote a book about bucks that got away, which I still continue to do. I missed one this season. So I'm looking to you guys to help me out there.
It's one of my favorite books.
All right, go ahead, Adrian.
I'm Adrian Geyer. I am by trade a strength coach and trainer, but very passionate, avid outdoorsman. I own a side brand that is geared towards physical preparation for backcountry athletes. And that's really led me deeper into the world of conservation, wildlife management, and the hunting and fishing industry. Other than that, I am just a passionate supporter of sound land, animal management, and conservation. And I think that's a big reason why I'm sitting here today, is that just trying to help others disseminate knowledge and strengthen our voice in these really scary kind of anti-hunting battles that we're now being. They've been going for a long time, but we're now becoming more and more aware of them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Mike?
Boy, I just turned 70 this year, so I'm going to try to keep it short. Non-hunting background. I'm Michael Colson, born in Connecticut in suburban land. Didn't start hunting until some really kind people were willing to take me under their wing, and I just went crazy for it. I think I was born with the passion, but it wasn't nurtured. Love the outdoors. Hunt really sort of connected wading in brooks when I was a kid. Soon after that, I realized somebody took the time with me and I needed to pay it forward. So I got certified through the state of Vermont. Hunter Ed, Trapper Ed. Went to a seminar on the Let's Go Fishing program, which eventually turned into that program here in Vermont. Finally moved to the kingdom after 2002. My son drew a moose permit. Fell in love with it, and we spent the next 15 years looking for a place to live. No looking back. I'm going to die here.
You found your spot.
I found my spot. Not moving again. And just retired from UPS after 28 years. I always told kids in my hunter classes, be careful, because if that UPS driver's a hunter, he's really scouting. And it actually brought me a lot of permission, and I handed out hunter ed manuals and networked to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Had more land than I could ever possibly hunt on. Love to teach, love to see that passion in kids who just want that, their cash.
Yeah.
He's a tiger. I think nature is the cure. It's the only thing that's consistent in this crazy world, especially post-COVID. and it's the healer. Sit underneath the tree and let a red squirrel lay out of your hand and try to keep from choking it. And so that brings me to the table. Got asked to be on the board, tried to talk him out of it. But I got the position, and I finished my 6 years in February of this year.
Representative for Essex County.
Essex County,
And that's the Fish and Wildlife Board of Vermont.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
How-
And very growthful experience. A couple of years to sort of see how am I going to fit in here, and the last 2 years has been pretty challenging, just because of the political nature of people wanting to take away what we just live and breathe and think about while we're driving down the road. And so, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Letting-
no, thanks for doing this.
Yep.
It's needed. Much needed. Matt, you want to jump into it and just tell us a little bit about?
Yeah. The whole, a big premise of S.258 is changing the very structure and formation of the Fish and Wildlife Board. It would disband the current board and replace it with a bunch of new committee members, new board members that would be appointed by legislative committees. And in the 1960s, the legislature realized they were not very good at managing wildlife, and so they moved a lot of that to professionals within the department, and then formed this Fish and Wildlife Board, or what became the Fish and Wildlife Board, to help with regulations and to give citizens a voice. And that process has worked really, really well since then. I don't think there's a species, certainly not a species that we hunt, that hasn't benefited from that. You know, the only bird populations that are increasing are ducks, because we put a lot of time and energy into Ducks Unlimited and duck stamps and all that habitat work. So this bill would try to seek to change that board structure and change it to a bunch of different appointees and give more policy. It change it to an advisory capacity, and the department would have more play there. And so really, to me, this is, as I said before we started, it's a solution looking for a problem.
So some of these people that will be representing the board will be non-hunters.
Right. Yeah. The original language of the bill was non-consumptive users, and I would challenge that. Everyone's a consumer if you're alive on this planet. No one exists without the earth giving to you, and then we all die and give back. And so, yeah. So they've changed it to non-licensed appointees. There's nothing in the current regulations, the way people get appointed, that would limit. Like, there's nothing in there that says you have to have a license now. And so I think having a license gives you at least a certain level of awareness of how the state works and regulates things. And so you're somewhat, and you also have demonstrated an interest in fish and wildlife if you have that license. And so, yeah, now it's non-licensed users are going to make up a certain percentage of this advisory board.
So you'd put people on that board, correct me if I'm wrong, that essentially would base decisions based off of emotions or love for animals rather than the actual science behind hunting, fishing, trapping.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, everyone has emotion around this stuff, and I think it's somewhat unfair to say, oh, nothing's emotional. So many of these issues, really, rather than being biological, are sociological.
Yeah.
We're dealing with sociology and human relations, and I think, yes, putting people on the board who aren't aware of the role hunting and fishing plays is really the problem here. That are potentially actively against those processes, and that's a real problem.
Yeah.
Many of them don't even know why they're against it. They don't have real evidence-based opinions. Again, to go back to emotion, and also kind of what their group follows and what type of mindset. Where a lot of times just a little bit of education goes a long ways with helping folks understand what how much love we as outdoorsmen and emotion truly have for definitely more than the non-consumptive or non-licensed individuals. When you said that made me think, how do we show folks that emotion? you know, and how much we truly do care. We're not killers, you know. We're here to take part in good land and animal management, wildlife management.
Some of the most passionate people
Oh,
towards animals, wildlife, pet owners. It's not about killing an animal.
yeah, yep, for sure. Yeah, taking part.
Yeah, and I think, so much of what we value about it is really hard to put into a soundbite or a Twitter post and really convey the depth and breadth of what it means to us. And so the message is hard to get across unless someone's really willing to pay attention for a while, sit down and have a conversation about the whole process. Like, do you know where your meat comes from?
Can I jump in?
Jump.
So this is a deer hunting podcast, and I had the most incredible experience this year deer hunting with I wouldn't call him a non-consumptive, definitely non-licensed, and also potentially, and he would be on the anti-hunting side. So I don't like to give away states, but I was in a state where I had to hike in, and these are public hiking trails, and I had spent 3 days solo in this particular state, and on that third day, tracked a really nice buck and shot it. It was a long ways out, and made the decision that I was going to drag that deer out rather than cut it up. Again, I'm alone. So it was about 1.5 miles to the closest hiking trail. And so I'm dragging, and it took me about 5 hours to get to the trail. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, man, it would be nice if I got to that trail and somebody was coming down it and wanted to give me a hand it was about 1.5 miles, but it was flat, and the trail was dry. So I get to that trail, and a guy is walking down. I could not have delayed or sped up or done anything different to make these 2 points connect in the middle of the wilderness. And he's coming, just a hiker. He's coming down the trail, and boom, we hit. And he stops, and he's like, whoa, hey.
What's going on?
Hi. Hey, and I shake his hand. I'm Adrian, and oh yeah. So what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm dragging this deer out. I just harvested, and I think that's an important term to use when you're dealing with somebody who obviously was unaware of hunting, how it all works anyway. And so we make small talk, and he's like, God, I've never seen a live one. I'm like, well, this one's not live, but you're welcome to, and he's like standing back. And I knew that maybe my help was not what I had wished for. So anyway, we made small talk for 5 minutes, and I said to him, hey, so, I got to drag him down to the trailhead here. Would you mind giving me a hand? Grab the other side of this stick. And he said, I'd really rather not.
Wow.
And I was okay with that. Like, I half expected it based on the leading up to that question. They said, you know what? That's fine. I totally understand, and I'm not. I don't judge. And I was almost prepared for that because of what had transpired. I said, we all have our different way of living our lives, and this is very important to me. I'm going to feed my family with this meat, and he was like, oh yeah, and you could see that he wasn't ready to just run down the trail without me. So I drag the deer. I start coming down the trail. The guy walked in front of me, talking to me while I'm dragging.
Wow.
Chatting.
Wow.
Because I was telling this story.
Yeah.
So here I am having a conversation with potentially call him an anti-hunter, but somebody who had no desire to take part in any way, and likely, based on some experience that he had as a child, where a deer was actually dragged through a suburban home, dragged through his yard, and by guys that didn't ask permission, etc. And he had this right then. That set this very visceral response to hunters at a very young age.
Right.
And I knew that here was my opportunity, as everything I preach about, but I preach about it to people who are in my circle and who understand this, and they're there with me. So in some ways, it's like, a very captive audience. So I'm explaining, so you're going to eat that deer? I said, well, yeah. I said, actually, this is the third buck that I've shot this year. Oh, my God, you've shot 3? How do you eat them all? It's like, well, actually, my family eats 3 pounds of meat a day, and I also shot an elk and a bear this year, and that's still only putting us at about 600 and so pounds of yield, and we're going to need to purchase a quarter cow to fill the gap. And he's just like, oh, my God. And I said to him, do you eat meat? And he said, and he just dropped his head and he nodded. He said, yep, and you're right. And I didn't have to say what I was going to say next. He said, you're right. He said, do you know where that meat comes from? And he's a smart guy. He actually ended up being a journalist.
Oh, really?
Lives in Brooklyn. So here I am thinking like Michael Easter in Comfort Crisis, like, hey, maybe this guy tells a story sometime. By the end of the trip, I explained to him my why. That's all I did. A very passionate why for why I hunt and why I engage in fair chase and field to table and how important this unaltered meat is. Yeah, you're right, man. Commercial farming isn't always great. Like there's a lot of bad that comes from that. It's not necessarily the carbon footprint, which is one of those myths that's thrown out there. But there's a lot of other bullshit that goes into, a lot of that meat and the processes that are going into it. So you got to give with them too, like you spoke about with bringing people the Tai Chi. Yeah. He got it. He totally got it. We had a half mile left, and it was flat and like it was kind of muddy on the trail, and I'd stop, to rest. Are you all right? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm just, about 3 miles into this drag, and I'm tired, He's like, oh, yeah. And he'd stand there and wait for me to get going.
Really?
Wow.
He wouldn't help?
Half mile left. He looked back at me, and I'm like, stretching out the forearms, And I wouldn't go that fast, except for the fact that I'm trying to have this conversation. And he said, you know what? I'm going to do it. Give me a side of that stick. And I was like ready to cry.
Yeah.
It was like we just bonded in such a way. I can't remember his name. I've got it written down. We grabbed that stick and we dragged to the parking lot. And he says to me, can I get a picture? And I'm like, well, what are you going to do with that picture? And he said, no, I just want to show my family. Nobody will believe me. Nobody's going to believe that this happened to me. Yeah. And I said to him, I want to say his name was Matt. I said, Matt, likely nobody's going to believe me either. Our stars align today. And I just really hope that, your vision of hunters and hunting and conservation, has maybe changed a little bit. Yeah. And that you now have some empathy for us, because I know that not all anti-hunters are potentially bad people. And you now know that not all hunters are like the guys that dragged that deer across your backyard when you were a kid, and potentially they weren't either. They just made a bad decision. Yeah. And he totally got it, and it was like this really neat moment. The funny ending is that we get to the parking lot. He grabbed a hold of the drag stick, of course. He had gloves on. First thing he says, you got any hand sanitizer? I'm like, yeah, I actually do. Here you go. You don't even worry about, but he still had this this is this dead animal. Yeah. But I think he then left that day as that was food for that man's family, and that was that man taking part in conservation. We went through all of it because we had time. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my story on.
That's a very good story.
How do we bridge that gap?
A lot of these people, like this gentleman, had just never been exposed to it, and maybe when he was exposed to it, it was a bad scenario in his mind, right? But I think running into somebody like you, and explaining it to him, it all just came together. Yeah. Points connected. Yep. That's pretty special, right? And then
it's so special.
Yeah. He's gonna tell his people about it, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty neat. We talked about, bow hunting. I think that's always we talk about gateway drugs. I think that's like a gateway form of hunting for folks that are on the fence.
Yep.
Right.
I have a vegetarian, very close friend who's a vegetarian, and we were at a hiking trip last year in the Whites in the summer, and my brother pulls out backstrap and throws it on the grill, and there's 4 of us there plus the vegetarian friend, and he says, "Can I get some of that?" And we were like, yeah, absolutely. And then he went into, I'm thinking about getting my bow hunting license. There's too many deer in Chittenden County.
Right.
And I really want to take part, but I don't want to be like, that was his way of coming into it more ethically.
Sure.
And we were like blown away, but we were also like very much in support of like, hey, oh, well, I'll help, like what can we do? And that's a great idea. Learn to shoot first. And so like, I feel like it's there. Like,
Oh, it certainly is. And it's so
viscerally,
much
as you said,
food.
Mike.
Like food is sort of the thing that ties the circle together.
Food is definitely
Totally.
the common denominator.
Yeah,
Totally.
Yeah.
It's just getting those people exposed to it through one way or another. I had a buddy that he found alcohol, right? And it was ruining his life. And he saw how passionate I was. We played sports together all the way up through. And he saw how passionate I was about the outdoors. He came to me and asked, about it. I set him all up. And to this day, like, that is his thing, right?
Yeah.
He's not about the killing of an animal, but he enjoys his time out there. He understands it.
Yeah.
And he can separate the difference, It's important.
It really is.
Very polarizing world that we live in. And some folks, most folks, really just have a hard time seeing. Me too. There's times where there's a lot of different just crap put in front of us. And it's very hard to like separate the layers and just be like, wait a minute, what is actually happening here?
Right. What's the signal versus what's just the noise that I don't need to pay attention to?
For sure. And I think that, sorry to interrupt on your
Yeah.
explanation of S.258, but I think that back to what you were saying, like how do we do that?
Right.
Like how do we remove the noise here in this bill and get down to like what is actually happening?
Right. And I think there are, like, I generally try to view civil servants, whether they're legislators or members of the Fish and Wildlife Department at all levels, like they're trying to do good work. I don't think anyone goes in there with ill intent. And yet if the only voice they hear is the anti-hunter, like these legislators are like, oh, wow, there's obviously a problem here. And like, we need to do something about this. And so, like, if we talk bigger picture, we need more hunters involved and fishermen and trappers more of the time. And there's certainly a few people who are regular voices out there, whether they're paid lobbyists or just engaged folks. But the vast majority of hunters, fishermen, and trappers would just prefer to do their thing and not jump in and weigh in and be involved. And yet, this thing we love, we need to, it's like a plant in our house. We need to water it, make sure it's got good soil and get some sunshine. We need to give it love and care, not just enjoy the fruits of it. We can't just have the fruit of our labors without putting the labor in. And some of the labor, in addition to scouting and putting time in the woods, is taking care of things on the policy side. And I can tell you, having more conversations with biologists and not with an agenda. We got to just like know people as people first, just like what Adrian went through. Like, you couldn't have just started with that conversation. You have to build a bridge and some trust to make that happen.
And it can end in the first 5 seconds.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, at the point where I say, hey, you want to give me a hand? And he says no. How many guys do you know that would be like, go F yourself?
Yeah.
How could you not help me? It's like,
It could be a photo, a video, something they see on media.
Right. And so much of what we do, like within our own circle, like when we're inward facing with our communications among the hunting, angling, trapping community, we all know how that goes. And so nothing really strikes us as anything. But when it's outward facing, it's viewed entirely differently. And so we need to, as we get more refined in our approach and as we get more involved, we need to just realize that. And we're not going to change, like avid anti-hunters, we're not going to change their minds. But like, I always think about my grandmother. Like, she didn't deer hunt, but she loved seeing us come in with a deer. We had to stop and show her a deer if we shot one.
Yeah.
And she loved to come out. She loved seeing us happy.
Yeah.
And so she's who, and she's gone now, but she's who would be a strong advocate, even though she doesn't hunt. And those are the people we need to remain in the good graces of more often.
You have to conduct yourself
My wife was the same way.
on the high road.
Yeah. My wife was the same way. I mean, she came from a hunting family, had never been, taken out there to experience it.
That's a huge
She
thing.
was a pageant girl, right?
Yeah.
And I took her bow hunting. And next thing you know, there's deer 5 yards away from us, right? And she thought it was the coolest experience in the world. Most of it's just getting these people out there to just experience it.
Yeah.
It's not about killing. It's just
The
getting out there.
experience.
Hunting or fishing or any of this other outdoor activities, it means something different to everybody. And trying to bridge that gap, as you say, right, is very, very difficult to do. And I guess with this whole Northwoods Whitetails thing, that's what we're trying to do, is create the next generation of believers, people to protect this, right? To protect these company lands that we love so much.
Right.
For us, we see the analytics of it, and our audience is people from 21 to 35, right? So if we can influence them, they're going to influence their kids. Kids going to do what dad does, right?
Right.
That's where this starts. But how do you reach this 31 to 80 or 90? How do we reach those people? Even the non-hunters, we were talking about that 80% that doesn't know what's going on with any of this. How do we inform them?
Yeah, and I think it's conversations with guys at trailheads. I hunt in Colorado. There's people there that are not hunters. They're just hikers. They're out there. God, the woods are crowded out there in spots. But quality interactions. Everyone's an ambassador, whether they want to be or not.
Yeah.
And so you got to conduct yourself well and have those conversations. And then, if we bring it back to S.258, we've got these 21 to 35-year-olds need to step up and make sure they're being involved.
Yeah.
I sent this message out to a few contacts, and they had no clue.
Yeah.
I mean, and your dad, not 21,
Oh, yeah.
Adrian.
I mean, here's a guy that not only was an avid outdoorsman still to this day, also a career forest. I mean, he's a logger.
Yeah.
And, logger of the year accolades, and talk about dealing with antis. When he logged land in East Burke where the Kingdom Trails passed through.
Yeah.
And he'd be sitting there on his, by his skidder with a down tree, and you got people coming up from Mass and New York and Quebec and all over the place. And all of a sudden they see this guy destroying their serenity. And he had so many opportunities to have those conversations and win these people over.
Yeah.
And ultimately, a lot of it is, hey, you realize that the land you're on is private land,
Yep.
and that landowner is going to pay his taxes with this.
Yep.
And also, this is going to help improve not only the health of this timber stand, but also the sustainability.
Yep.
So having these conversations just helps them understand that we're not murdering trees or we murdering animals. We're taking part in this much bigger sustainability form of conservation, and we're here.
Yeah.
Like, we're here. I mean, I started in wildlife biology in school, and one of the first things in ecosystem management is like you got to have the right feng shui between these different species and organisms.
Yep.
And humans are here. Like, we're not going anywhere. There's too many of us.
Right. Yeah, and we need to participate in the process.
That's
we can't
it.
just sit aside
Exactly.
and think everything's coming to us in the grocery store. I mean, Aldo Leopold said it. The greatest danger is thinking heat comes from the fireplace and food comes from the refrigerator. It's a way deeper process than that.
Yeah.
Mike, your time on the board, this changes the role of the board. Do you think it needs to be changed?
No, I don't. I think that the picture is so big because I'm of the generation where most of my relatives went through World War II. My dad was in the submarine service. And he was such a disciplinarian that I actually felt like I went through World War II with him because we used to go to the sub base in Connecticut. Of course, my mom and dad both went through the Depression. I learned real quick you clean your plate.
Yeah.
We got sassy with Mom in her teen years, and she served polenta for a week, which is basically cornmeal with a divot in the middle and a ladle of tomato sauce. And by Thursday, we were begging for liver and onions. But I got it. I got it.
Yeah, you learned your lesson there.
And those, I think about them every day. I stand outside at least twice a day and say, I hope you guys are good up there, and thank you. Thank you for work ethic. Thank you for choices. Yeah, you don't have to go to church, but you can't go out and play with your friends on Sunday afternoon. Giving kids choices that give them boundaries. So as humans, we get to an adulthood and we have boundaries. No, I'm not going to do drugs. No, I'm not going to drink to excess. So, your question about the view of the board, I don't know. I grew up believing that the Constitution, we are so fortunate to be born here and now, our freedoms, that we take it for granted. I don't take them for granted. I think they need to be preserved, and they have been eroded. The board is a check and balance between the license holder and the department and the community at large. The department is not always right. The board listens to the license holder, listens to the department, somewhere in the middle. They're not going to be happy with this, And that's a good thing. And nature is never stagnant. Yeah. It moves. My little conversation here, it's already moved. A partridge got hit by a log truck, and the crows are going to eat it. And we all know that, but how do we transfer that to the 80%, to the people sitting on the fence? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You look at the elephant and go, oh, I'm never going to finish that. Mom told me I got to have a clean plate. It's going to take me 2 years.
So do you feel as though that's how the board is viewing this?
I think the last thing I said at the last meeting is I looked around the room. I said, I'm really very honored to have done this. I said, if we have diversity, equity, and inclusion on this board already. Everybody brings something to the table. Same with the staff. Best people on the planet. Knowledgeable, caring, just like us, about what happens when we're in the woods and in nature. And they're that same way. They just have a sheepskin for it. They know their stuff. The sad part is that those who want to take this away, I don't think really get it. I don't think they understand that those foxes they love and those coyotes they love are abundant. And they get to enjoy them. Their passion is because we regulate ourselves. And they're healthy and they're out there and you can see them. By ending it, we know that's not going to work. We've already done that. We've done that in our history. Wiped out the buffalo. Said, oops, what are we going to do about this? Sportsmen brought it on, regulation. It's a good thing. I think it's the most successful thing man has done on the planet. That's how I feel about it. That's why my life has become what it is, because we should be proud of what we've done.
Yeah.
I've sat in on those board meetings, and I feel as though what I've gathered from this is that it's getting to a point where politics are starting to micromanage our wildlife, right? Like the people within the wildlife departments are fighting against our rights more than they are actually managing
Doing
our
the work.
wildlife.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Doing what they're paid to do, and it's
Yeah.
just costing more money and more money and more money. Like,
Yep.
Right, and that's one of the downsides of this bill. If you read, the department put out a piece of testimony on it, which I'm not sure that the sponsor of the bill ever actually read, but their testimony said that this would cost the department inordinate amounts of money to do all this work. They'd have to potentially hire a couple extra lawyers and do all this stuff that just I don't think has been thought about. And it's not like this isn't working. Like this is already going well.
yeah,
Like we, potentially on the planet, the North American model of wildlife conservation is the most successful conservation process in the whole world.
Yeah.
And why change it?
Yep.
there's already boundaries put in place. Things are working, and I don't know that it needs to change. And so I think we just need to, stay active and involved and make sure our voice is heard more than when crises like these pop up. And I think the word crisis is overused many times, but for hunters and anglers, this one's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to read from the notes from that testimony that most of the appointees in this new model will come from legislative committee members, most of whom have no qualifications in these matters at all. 5 from each house. I think that's the scariest piece.
It is.
Yeah, and I think the other 5 come from the commissioner, if I recall that. I don't remember for sure.
Yeah.
It's been revamped a couple times.
Yeah, a couple times. But
But-
and then that's that's the hen watching or the fox watching the hen house at that point.
And to go further into that, in effect, this gives the board advisory authority over all facets of the department, from law enforcement to outreach and education, participation in Act 250 and other regulatory processes, the recovery of endangered species, fish stocking, habitat management, land acquisition.
Right.
And like when you follow the money, now you're starting to kind of get it. It's more than just the hunting rights.
Sure.
Like there's a lot of leverage in here. Landscape conservation efforts, and that's in addition to the hunting, fishing, and trapping.
Right.
So that what you're saying is a lot of those funds are now going.
Yeah. Well, and it gives leverage in those decisions, which when we were talking about before, why? Like, where does so-and-so's husband, where does this money come from, and why?
Right.
Well, it might not potentially be just the hunting. When you rewrite this way, it's not just coyotes they're after or hounds.
Yeah. There's a lot of bigger stuff at play here.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's why it's so important that we just do our part and educate. Start with your peer groups. Reach out to your legislators, your lawmakers. In the state of Vermont, many of these people live in. You see them at the coffee shop. Have a conversation with them. My brother, he reached out by text to Russ.
Yeah, Senator Ingalls.
And they know each other, and Russ tells Nick, I know, I'm doing the best I can. We have to keep fighting this. Here's something else that you can do.
Yep.
And those conversations, the more they're happening, because you put the heat on these elected officials, these lawmakers, and they know they're going to see you in the coffee shop.
Right. Yeah. Which I think is the value of living in a small state and having the representative democracy that we do, is these people, they're part of the community.
Yeah.
And
Whereas you go to somewhere like, we're not the only state dealing with this.
Right.
It's full-fledged war across the country. Colorado, Chris, of course, was just down in Arkansas. And, those are places where lawmakers can hide. They can make these decisions from the office and be the talking head and not have to, deal with potentially the wrath or that conversation. Again, that human to human conversation is so powerful, and nobody wants to be disliked.
Yep.
We all want to have a purpose, and we want to serve our role as a official or whatever that might be. And I think what I'm being told, that most of the lawmakers are in opposition.
I think it's hard to say, and so much of that, it's a complicated game over there that, they may vote one way on something, so they get something somewhere else down the road. There's I think a lot of backroom deals, and who knows how politics work. I don't even, I don't understand it. I don't want to understand it fully. Right. I just know that I need to weigh in and speak my truth about this stuff to people, that how important it is to me, how negatively it would impact not only my life, but potentially generations down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think so often they don't know anything until we tell them.
Right.
And I think, it's important to be respectful and engage sincerely and just hey, do you know this?
Yeah.
I forwarded the department's testimony to the appropriations committee, and a guy was reading from it. I don't know if he got it from me or he got it on his own, but it matters. I think it matters to speak up, and we have to, because they don't know. And no one else is fighting the battle for you. You know, I went to a wilderness first aid training this last weekend, which was great. And one of the first lines out of the instructor's mouth is, no one's coming for you.
Yeah.
Like, you got to learn to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that has
So-
ramifications at
so
so many levels.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. This bill, dive into it a little bit. Like, what is this going to affect? Somebody explain how much this is going to affect everything that we love or do, or, you know, it's not just the coyote hunting, right?
No, and it's interesting to me. At the end of this bill, they tacked on the coyote hunting changes, use of hounds and bait, which, that happened. There's a trapping piece,
Yep.
and that just went through last year. We haven't even had a chance to see how that's going to work out, and they're already changing it because they didn't like it.
Yep.
And who they is, the sponsor of the bill, and probably the people that are talking to him, and then changing the role and the structure of the board, is has the potential, and who knows when it would happen, but it has the potential to really change a number of regulations and the emphasis of how wildlife is managed, and then, like Adrian was talking about, how so many other things might be managed. Because it begins to not just affect the Department of Fish and Wildlife, but there's verbiage in the last version of the bill that I read that the Agency of Natural Resources, they get to have input on that, and so it's far-reaching, and I think it
makes it more complex than it needs to be.
right.
If it involves more and more separate departments under A&R, then nothing gets done.
Yeah.
Nothing gets done. I think, possibly, and key point, I love this from Molly, wildlife didn't get the memo. They breed, they fight, they develop territory.
They try and survive.
They try and survive. Overpopulation causes ravaging disease. We harvest healthy animals, and we trust in the science of we can only issue so many no permits. They've taken a plunge, the tornado or the flood wiped out the habitat, so we're going to make this adjustment. But they just do what they do, and they do it well. For the same reason, on the human end, should we as sportsmen put together a bill or change a law that says if you're going to be on the Natural Resource Committee that's going to decide on this, you need to take on a red. You need to be certified.
Yeah.
And we put that in, if we need to put it to a vote statewide and have a good promo campaign that says, why would you want your kid's driving instructor to be a DUI?
Yeah.
You
Very
know?
good point.
Yeah, these people need to know. And I was on the committee on the trapping working group, so we invited the antis to the table, the people who didn't like trapping, and Senator Bray was there. He's on the Trapper Association video that they put out. He sponsored S.258. How can that be?
Yeah.
And I just wrote to him and said, what happened? What happened here?
Does anybody know? Really? What?
I think the animal rights people don't have a day job, and they're living at the Capitol. And whenever they come out of a meeting, they're on them in the hallway, to the point where they're going, the only way I can get rid of these people is to pass this bill to get them off my back.
Give in.
I'm assuming that's speculation on my part, but we do what we do because we know it's right for us.
Yeah.
Our job is to make others who don't want to pursue it understand that what we're doing is okay for us.
So there's a lot of people listening to this that it's purely about deer hunting, right? How is this going to affect my deer hunting? Can somebody kind of explain that? Like, what are these guys coming for? They want it all, right?
Well, they're starting with hounds. We know that battle. Bear bait, hounds, trapping, because those are the easiest battles to wage and win. Smallest populations, ultimately. And then it moves from there.
Bow hunting.
Well, yeah, I think that probably bow hunting would be the last because it's most ethical potentially, although some might also argue that in terms of inhumaneness if wounded animals. But neither here nor there. How will it impact hunting down the road? I think it's just this, to use your analogy, go ahead. I mean,
I heard this the other day, and it was, that they're going to pick the fruit, and then they're going to cut the branch, and then they're going to cut the tree, and then they're going to walk their way into the forest, and they're going to clear cut it.
Yep.
Right? So you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. And it's very important that we all stand together. Like, to the deer hunter that's listening to this, that's like, I'm not a hound owner. I don't, have anything to do with that. It's not about that. Like, we all have to stand together, whether you believe in it or not, whether you like trapping or hounding or any of that stuff. We have to stand together. And if we don't stand together, they're going to start picking the fruit, and then they're going to cut the branch.
Yeah.
And before you know it, the tree's laying on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Look at it this way. It's your home. Okay? Somebody shows up at your home and pulls the apple off your tree in your front yard. Okay, no big deal. Hopefully they ate that apple. Then they come into the yard and they take, the next thing they take is your kid's bike. It's like, you call the cops. The cops don't really care because they got bigger fish to fry. The next thing you know, they're in your home. Mm-hmm. And now they're stealing from you. And now they're a threat, a very real threat. So I think that if you look at it like self-defense, we'll go Mike Glover on this one. Mm-hmm. Like situational awareness. Like, how aware are we of what is actually happening? And they're going to take that apple, to use that analogy, because nobody's going to care. No, all right, no big deal. We'll let that slide. That being the coyote, hounds, and then it'll move to upland dogs, which impacts myself. And we have a small breeding business, but I love to bird hunt.
Yeah.
Then it'll move to at bears. Yeah. And it's going to be deer, and then it's going to be okay. Well, now how can we harvest deer? And now only this many deer, and now you can only do it this way. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you're. Because it's gone. And it's back to our kids. They're the ones who will truly suffer the most. Yep. Because by the time these things have the momentum and the snowball effect has happened, they're the ones that we truly need to educate. Yep. Have those, I think all parents right now are parenting hard, because this is, especially if your kid's in public school.
Oh, boy.
Like, it is a really scary world out there. But in a sense, this is just another one of those rights that we're having to parent and teach at the dinner table.
Yeah.
This is important to us and our family, and this is important to you, and this is the reason why. We parent hard in that way. I mean, my kids, of course, are very much immersed in this way of life. They get it. They help dad butcher the deer. They shoot their bow and their guns in the backyard. They can't wait to take hunter safety. Very captive audience in my household, but they have friends.
80% of their friends, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's because it's so much less accessible. Mm-hmm. I don't mean it in that it's not accessible for a child to get into. I feel like because this way of life has changed so much, technology has engulfed children at such a young age, that there's less opportunity. We hear it all the time. Kids don't go out and play anymore. Yeah. There's no neighborhood games. Yeah. These things are changing. So just being engaged in outdoor activity is probably the best way that you can educate the next generation. Yep. Hey, it's like I give my kids a Sawyer straw. We're going to go drink water out of the brook out back, the same brook that your dog just peed in. And that's okay, because we're going to filter it, and we learn this lesson. But also, hey, where does that water come from? Yeah. And how important is that to you? What if we didn't have water?
Yeah.
So they connect the dots. Kids don't have all this extra influence. They're not adults, as you talked about that, the walls. They just get it, so I think that that's a very important place for parents, outdoorsmen, people listening to this podcast. Have those conversations with your kids and make up, there should be lessons. Like, how are we going to solve this problem today? And it can be hypothetical. It doesn't have to. That kid might not ever be a hunter.
Yeah.
But if they understand it, then that's, again, the 80%. That's so important. Rights as deer hunters, you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
It's happening.
It's coming.
And it's other states. It's happened.
Yep.
You know, you're watching this decay. We're watching this stripping of rights, and we're. This is unfortunately not a war that will end with S.258.
Right. And that's why it keeps coming back to staying engaged and having conversations. But you gotta, your senator, your representative should know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Reach
That's
out.
a great point.
Like just
By name.
And
Yep.
so like at BHA, we put out an action alert. You know, simple click, put in your name, number, and it'll send an automated email.
Yep.
That's a first step.
Yep.
It's not even that great a step. You know, those automated emails don't get looked at the same way as sending a personalized email with your passion on display.
Yeah.
I love this.
Respectfully.
Respectfully, passionately defending
Yeah.
your position on why you would oppose whatever's out there. And then even beyond that, you know, calling the sergeant at arms and they deliver a message to your senator. Like someone took the time to make a phone call, like actually engage.
Right.
You know, and so I think whatever level people are comfortable with, but engage. You know, step it up one level from where you've been.
So the people listening right now are like, okay, so how do I do that? That was what I put out in the Facebook video the other day. Agatha Kessler is our sergeant at arms, and I put up her email. I have it right here somewhere. That would be, and maybe it can go in the show notes.
We can put it in the links. We
Why
can
don't-
put it in the bio. We
Yeah,
can do whatever.
Do that. What Matt just brought up about the BHA, the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I mean, if you are feeling like I'm helpless, you know, which a lot of people potentially are, they're probably listening and saying, well, how do I do this? What do I do first? Matt just pointed out a really good first step, becoming a member of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, an organization that literally is fighting this fight at ground zero all the time, everywhere. So they're very, very aware and can help you with those steps. Howl.org, another organization that you can donate to, become a member, and just help get this knowledge as to what do I do next? How do I fight? And be part of a community of people that are very much vested in that.
Right. And just educating yourself to understand the process. It's easier not to. Like
Sure.
we got a fresh snow this morning. I'd just as soon go track a snowshoe hare, you know, put some meat on the table. It's a lot of fun, but it's important to be involved and engage at some level and just ask the question. There's plenty of people out there to help. You know, you just gotta start.
The simplest of tools also, I think, because even a guy driving a skidder's got a cell phone now. Mm-hmm. And you have the 800 number to the Sergeant of Arms. You get word through a link. You make a 800 phone call. Mm-hmm. I'm against S.258.
Or whatever's next. You know, we're
Yep.
March 16th. You know,
Yep.
if you're not listening to this podcast
Yep.
right away
Yep.
and you hear it a month from now, I'm sure there is something else out there you can do. Some
Yep.
other issue we need to engage on.
Right.
Or maybe there's no issue. Reach out to your senator. Hey, I'm a hunter. I'm a constituent of yours. And I think we haven't even mentioned, like, hunters and anglers need to vote.
Yeah.
So many of us, because we feel powerless, you have to go vote for your representative.
Yeah.
That gives you a little bit of you start to feel like, hey, I need to talk to this person. You know, hey, I voted for you.
Yeah.
Or I might vote for you next election. But
Yep.
this issue concerns me. Most politicians want to get reelected.
Yeah.
And so they listen to their constituents.
Yep.
And it really doesn't take that much time.
No.
We're talking minutes.
Yeah, I do. There can be controversy over absentee ballots, but you know the elections are usually during deer season somewhere. I get my absentee ballot, so that's out of the way, and then I'm in the woods on election day.
Yeah.
The rest of you should go out and go to the polls while I'm out there, so I can have the woods to myself.
Take your pick of buck tracks.
Yeah,
And you know, that's great. You have to bring humor to the table. And so when you put that information out there, say, please make sure you leave the woods to vote.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I know where you're hunting anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, the UPS guy always knows who's parked where.
There's going to be a lot of people that just don't want to do any different than what they're doing, right? Or don't have the time or any of that. How can they quickly contribute? Is that joining Backcountry Hunters and Anglers and
Yeah, and
join it? You know, what's a membership cost?
$35.
And that goes to avenues of fighting it, right?
That's
Right.
exactly right.
You
And
know,
you're going to get
so-
a whole bunch of member incentives. I mean, our business is a corporate partner with backcountry hunters and anglers. So we provide a service, the physical prep through the website or to these members. But there's like discounts on Onyx and everything that you love and the gear and such. And I hate to, we're trying not to bribe necessarily, but there's a lot of incentives to being a member that $35 will get you. The same with, as I mentioned, Howell. We're another corporate partner with them. These are things that businesses can do, Northwoods can do. Become a member, or maybe you want to take it a step further and be, in a position such as Matt, where you can really help, have boots on the ground and
there's
a
all
part
sorts
of
of volunteer opportunities that we try to come up with. We've done tree plantings and that sort of stuff. So it's more, it's more than just this, but all that other stuff helps with this. And if you look at BHA and that doesn't resonate with you, join another organization.
Yeah.
There's someone
Sure,
out there
yeah.
speaking up, the Traditions Coalition or
Right, yes,
Federation of
yep.
Sportsmen's Clubs. Any of those people would be happy to take your money.
Oh, yeah.
And happy to have you volunteer. It's a matter of do you have the time and energy? And if you don't, your license probably isn't enough anymore. You gotta step up and weigh in, and then take a minute to email folks when the time comes and just keep paying attention, I think.
Well, and now is one of those times
Yeah,
to
for
be
sure.
reaching out. So for those listening, Joey can put it in the notes. We'll give some action plans, who to email. We've all pointed out the message that you need to help, portray to these lawmakers, and how much it means to you and your family, and then hope that makes a difference. And that's a couple minutes. If anybody's listened to this podcast, if you took all this time to listen to us today and just spread that out over the year, you've now got a yearly conservation wildlife management plan that is super comprehensive. Just that amount of time. And we all have time. Stop wasting time. I mean, like, really. You'll make time to go hunting and fishing. Then you need to make time for this, because this is how we do it.
Yeah.
How we have that access.
You guys want to add anything else in?
I got an interesting thing that changed my life probably about 30 years ago. I can do a graphic for you.
Just remember,
Unfortunately,
people are listening.
I
They
know
can't
they're
see it.
listening.
Talk us through it.
Maybe you could hold up a piece of paper on the podcast, but
Mike's drawing a circle.
here's a pie. I used to make this pie with a slice really thin like this. I learned this from Shane Mahoney, who came and spoke to the Hunter Ed instructors a long, long time ago. I now think that piece of pie is really just a single line. Just taking a knife and cutting it in. Shane talked about having to harvest caribou, and his grandmother was too old to hunt. And she needed a caribou or she would not live in the winter. He said, give me the most adamant, rabid anti-hunter, and we're going to walk out onto the tundra. My intention is to get Grandma a caribou. We will enjoy the lichen colors. We'll enjoy the smell. The birds will stop and take a deep breath and just really enjoy the day. Our common ground is the whole pie. The one difference is right here. When you turn and say, excuse me, I have to pull the trigger. And you lift up your gun and you shoot the caribou for your grandmother. He said, why do we dwell on that trigger when we have a pie full of common ground? Those antis love the red fox in their backyard. They just don't understand. It's curled up during a blizzard with its tail and its nose tucked into it. And it's gonna probably fight its pup it had in the spring to live, to eat that rabbit because it's pregnant again. And that to me calms me down to the point of being able to put my arm around them and say, "Oh, that must have been awful looking out your window and seeing those hounds tearing up a coyote in your backyard." I would have felt that way.
Sure.
I would have felt that way. Now, all they're going to remember on the way home is, boy, that guy took the time to talk to me. What a sensitive board member. Not hard to do.
Yep.
They got feelings.
Yeah, that's I love that. Like,
Yep.
just like the hunt experience that I had.
Yeah.
You know,
That was set up. As you told that story, I thought this is meant to be. Here it comes. You're thinking before you met him, boy, I hope I ran into somebody. Well, you brought it to yourself.
Yeah. Right.
How many
I know.
times in the woods have you heard a voice that said, "Stop"? Guys don't listen, but the ones that trust that stop, and there's a buck right there watching you.
Yeah.
You know,
I know. So
we have that in us.
Oh yeah.
We've done all this technology has washed it away. It's the veil, which is wide open when you're born. Now it's got Woolrich on it. It's got boots on it. It's got camo, man-made, oil-based fossil fuel material over your head so they don't see you. Gunpowder,
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of people listening to this who obviously have social media and they have platforms to influence. And I think that that's something that we all have to be extremely aware of, that those same platforms, whether you have 200 followers and they're mostly family members and friends, you still have this really, the world we live in provides us with this opportunity to influence others. And we want to be damn careful that how you're influencing is also going to reflect positively on the anti-hunting community, because that's what they're using. So before you post that grip and grin, maybe provide a little bit of backstory to how important this is to you. Maybe let that be the fish that your kid's holding up this spring, not just the kid holding the fish, but hey, this kid's now going to be a bigger part of this battle. Use that as your opportunity to educate.
Yeah.
We sometimes are so self-absorbed in whether it's making money or what we portray to others.
Yep.
And I think that we forget that there's a really big opportunity as an influencer, and we all know that there's plenty out there who are super famous by way of social media standards who are not doing their job, in that way. They have a huge following and yet they're helping the anti-hunting fight.
Yep.
And we have to, maybe it's them we need to educate as well and just ask, like, hey, do you realize what you're doing? That's the first thing I did with the farmer in Peacham who it was closing in on 2 million views of him and a disgruntled bear hunter who, most of us know who that is.
Yep.
Had that bear hunter approach that conversation like I approached the guy on the trail, that might be a lot different. This farmer, quote unquote farmer, he took that to the next level and provided fuel for the anti-hunting fire like nobody else in Vermont has done.
Right.
And that was really, I would hope that particular hunter, given the opportunity to do it again, would do it different. Mm-hmm. So that's another conversation that we can have with our constituents.
Yep.
And helping educate them. You just got to be, as I say to our trainers, I don't care what your education and your certifications are, if you're not a CNP first, a certified nice person. And we got to be, if we're going to take a life of an animal, we better be a certified nice person to those that are asking questions.
Yeah.
Because they deserve the right to do that too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just to have a little empathy. Yeah. Put yourself in their shoes and then do your best to educate.
Be respectful.
Yeah.
Respectful.
Yep.
And people are going to disagree, and that's okay.
Yep. Sure.
Like, people are entitled to their opinion, and you can have a conversation, and if it doesn't move the needle at all, that's all right. You shouldn't hold any ill will. You just need to direct your energy elsewhere and have more conversations with other people.
Yeah.
social media of all things, right? Because everything is out there for everybody to see.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we are where we are.
Yeah.
You know, why we're here
Yeah.
is because of social media. Put it out there for everybody to see.
Yeah.
Just to gain throwing fuel on the fire.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, people reach out, connect within and without,
Feel free
outside
to
of the community. Yeah.
reach out to us too. I mean,
Oh, for sure.
I'm an open book, or not necessarily a book, but reach out to me, and I can. If I don't know, I'm going to point you in the right direction. Don't feel like a message through social media or email or whatever. This is something that we here are all very passionate about, and we need to join forces and help.
Right.
So don't hesitate to reach out at any time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome.
All right, sounds good, guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, take care.
Thank you.